The U.S.-backed government in Ukraine is considering changes to its military draft mobilization laws. Those changes were proposed by President Vladimir Zelensky. Besides lowering the conscription age by 2 years, the legislation also calls for the introduction of electronic military summonses, which would be sent to the draftees online. The draftees would then face penalties for failing to show up at recruitment offices on time. Draft dodgers are to be added to the country's unified register of debtors. They will be banned from receiving benefits and services from the state, obtaining loans, traveling abroad, and carrying out banking transactions and transactions with movable and immovable property. Last week, Zelensky said the Ukrainian military had proposed mobilizing an additional 450 to 500,000 individuals amid the fighting with Russia. That announcement followed shortly after a statement by Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, who said that some 400,000 Ukrainian troops had been killed or wounded since the start of the conflict in February of last year. To sort some of this out, we go to Moscow to speak with analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, so it appears that Zelensky is having some difficulty finding soldiers.
Hi, Don. Yeah, so with the failure of the NATO proxy, this much ballyhooed summer offensive in the south of Ukraine, rather catastrophically, and Russia now pressing hard along the contact line everywhere, with the Kiev regime also having thrown their strategic reserves into the failed summer offensive. They're now desperate, shuffling troops around the front lines, trying to hold everywhere, buckling in multiple places. And the call has gone up in Kiev from the regime for the mobilization of another 450,000 to 500,000 troops now, right? So within, for the next year, right? That's in the short term. Now, on paper, on what they say, the Kiev regime announces or declares that they have a 1 million man army, 1.1 million actually. And you might say, well, where is this 1.1 million man army? Well, the Russian Ministry of Defense gives us an answer, because in a recent essentially an annual military conference which Putin attended, it was announced that they had inflicted thus far over the Russia's military intervention in Ukraine some 383,000 casualties on the Kiev regime's forces. So that's where they need the 450 to 500,000 troops from, because that is what their casualties are looking like at this point. And they're repeatedly, we hear from commanders in the battlefield that they're having manpower. Not only are they having ammunition shortages and everything else, but they're having manpower issues. And actually, in a piece in Time about a month ago already, Simon Schuster, speaking to some Kiev regime officials, officials within the Zelensky administration, speaking anonymously to Time. Not only did they say that Zelensky is delusional and you can't tell him that Kiev regime is losing the conflict, but also that even if the West gave all the weapons that Kiev could use, that they don't have enough men to use them. So they're having these enormous manpower issues. Now, Zelensky, within the last half a year, he, under accusations of corruption within the Kiev regime's military recruitment commissars, the press gangs that roam the country looking for people. And even a New York Times headline has finally admitted this now. It's 2 years too late into the conflict, but they have a headline that refers to them as people snatchers, right? That they physically grab people off the streets of Ukraine, drag them, knocking them unconscious if necessary, literally. There's hundreds and hundreds of videos on Ukrainian social media channels about this, and then send them within days to the front lines. I mean, most of them have never even fired guns or fired a few bullets in the couple days of quote unquote training they get before they're fed into the meat grinder. But they've had a failure of meeting recruitment goals in the last few months, and that was because Zelensky, in what might have been a fit of trying to please the West about corruption, or it may have been part of political maneuvering against Zaluzhny in Kiev, but he fired all of the military recruitment commissars and ordered Zelensky to bring all new ones in. Well, Zaluzhny was against that, and he has now talked about how the mobilization efforts, the conscription over the last few months have failed completely. They haven't had gotten nowhere near the amount of bodies that they need. Well, now this call has gone up for a new mobilization drive. Right now, there is legislation pending in the Kiev regime's Rada, its parliament, such as it is. And although it was openly discussed in the Rada by members of Zelensky's own Servant of the People party that they were going to start conscripting women in combat roles. That evidently is not going to happen now. They have decided to put that on the back burner. But the new issue, other than lowering the age and getting rid of different levels of disability status, what they're doing now is they want to get the Ukrainians, the millions of Ukrainians that have fled the conflict. Some 5 million of them went to Russia, but about an equal number went to Europe. And there are at least 650,000 military-age men who illegally fled the country as refugees into Europe over the last 2 years. Ukrainian men between the ages of 17 and 70 are not legally allowed to leave the country, right? Because they're subject to conscription. So now they're attempting to get these men back. And they are asking Western states to send them back forcibly. Now, Germany has already come out and said that they won't do so, at least now, although I have my question how long those quote-unquote values will remain as things get more and more desperate. But what they're already announcing is they're taking all sorts of they will be taking all sorts of measures to force these men to come back. They'll have their rights removed. They'll have their banking canceled. There's a whole raft of measures they're going to be called to try to force Ukrainian men to come back and fight for the regime. I don't think that this is going to be very successful. We've actually had people, several prominent people in the last couple of weeks, including a top pro-Kiev journalist on state TV in Kiev, and a group of volunteers who were officially out of the country on government business and then refused to come back. And we're already starting to see this where people like, I don't want to die. So even the Kiev regime's biggest cheerleaders are now getting out of Dodge rather than risk being sent to the front themselves. And I think most of the refugees in Europe will endure anything, although there are already calls within some European countries to remove the benefits that they've been giving to Ukrainian men unless they go back to fight. So it is going to be an attempt to get these men back into Ukraine by hook or by crook, one way or another. And the Kiev regime's Gobalesque presidential aide and mouthpiece, Podolyuk, has said openly that Western countries should kick out Ukrainian draft dodgers.
Yeah, look, given the track record of this government and the one prior that was elected, it was quote unquote after the coup. When you say by hook or crook, you could count on it, by crook being an important element of it. Those people that are being denied the benefits or it's going to have their benefits cut in Western Europe, we're also going to see one of the penalties from Kiev is going to be they no longer have any support with the local embassy, and so they're going to be stranded. All right, we're out of time. I'd like to thank you for your time today, Mark, and happy holidays. I know the holidays are coming up this coming week in Russia, and we'll speak with you again next week.
Thanks for having me.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.